What's going on, guys? Brock here, and I want you to win more games, which is why I want to prevent you from falling into these common beginner mistakes. For this to be helpful, I'm assuming you already understand the basic rules of the game, but if you're completely new, I'd recommend starting with this video. And let me know in the comments below, how many of these mistakes have you been making, or did you get a perfect score? Let's go find out. The first mistake is being afraid to lose life, as I think many players have this misconception that this is the most important aspect of the game, and if you have more life than your opponent, then you're winning. This mindset will result in players countering out multiple times even when they're still at full life, which can quickly shrink their hand size and get them behind. This can also lead to a false sense of confidence, as you may feel like you're winning the game if you're still at full life and your opponent only has 3 or 2. The problem with this mindset is it's too short-sighted, since now your opponent will have a significant hand size advantage to protect both their important characters and their life in future turns. I would say this mistake is like sprinting at the beginning of a marathon. It feels like you're ahead, but there's still a long way to go and players are going to catch up since you use too much too early. My second point on this is not all counter is equal, as you want to think about what you're protecting and what changes when you discard a counter. To start, what changes when we counter at 5 life? Well, this is likely happening on our opponent's second turn, which means they've just put down one 3 or 4 cost character and they're attacking solely with their leader. If we counter out, we lose a card and stay at full life, but nothing about the game is changing. We're not worried about losing next turn, we're not threatened by their board, and we're not concerned about being at 4 life. Overall, if we don't counter, we just add another card to our hand, and the game continues as it was. If we counter to protect a character instead, while we're still losing one card, they get to remain on the field, meaning we can attack once again next turn, and force our opponents to have to deal with them once again. My final point is losing a life isn't always a bad thing, since you're adding a card to your hand, and in some cases it could be exactly the card you're looking for to play on your next turn. So how should you manage your life? This can vary depending on your leader and strategy, but as a general guideline, I have the following. At 5 life or higher, you shouldn't counter the first attack that comes your way and just add that card to your hand. At 4 life and 3 life, there's nothing wrong with countering out from an attack, but this should only be done in the form of one card to counter. So if your opponent swings 2000 power or higher over your leader, it's probably good to just take the hit rather than to discard multiple cards to prevent it. And finally, at 2 life or lower, there's no set guideline, and you'll need to counter as needed to protect your life and avoid losing the game. Our second point ties into our first, as players are once again too focused on life, but this time it's on offense rather than defense. While it can be tempting to swing at your opponent's life each turn, you want to first prioritize their rested characters, especially ones with useful effects, and remove them first. This is because controlling the board means controlling the game, and when you remove one of their characters, they now have less resources to attack you with on the following turn. This means in the early and mid game, you should always be prioritizing board control over going for life. This will change depending on power differences, but if your opponent has a 5k leader and a 5k rested character, you always want to target that rested character first. If the character's power exceeds their leader by 1 to 2000, but you can still target it with an attack by either one of your own characters or attaching some Dawn, you still want to do that first. But if you're unable to, let's say you spent all of your Dawn and you can't attach or buff up your leader or character to threaten the rested character, well then you could go for life in this example, as you still want to threaten them with something rather than not attacking at all. As we approach the late game, there may be some characters that significantly exceed their leader's power, and if you don't have a character of a similar power on the field, or let's say you're using lower cost characters, it might make sense to rather ignore that character and focus on your leader's life now, since that's going to be the most effective way to attack. Of course, if you can remove it, that's still your number one goal, but in the late game, it's going to be okay to ignore one of their 2 characters, except that's going to be on the field, and go for life. This is because you want to focus on efficient attacks. If your opponent has a rested 10k powered character, and you had multiple 6 or 7k powered characters, it would likely make more sense to target their life and force them to discard multiple cards, rather than boosting up those characters to 10 or 11k power and only requiring your opponent to discard 1 card to counter. This ties into our third mistake, where players don't understand the 2k rule and how to attack most effectively against your opponent's characters. The 2k rule means if you attack at 2000 power above your opponent's leader or character, they are required to discard 2 cards in order to counter. This is because 2000 counter is the highest on any single card, meaning if you swing 2000 above, your opponent will have to discard both a 2000 and a 1000 counter in order to stop the attack. So when you are trying to remove a character, if you are able to get an attack that's 2000 power above, you really want to do so, as it will force your opponent to discard 2 cards and really get you ahead on resources. While we're on the topic of attacking, the next mistake is not attacking in ascending order if you are targeting your opponent's life. And note this doesn't apply to attacking characters, this is simply when we're targeting life. This is because each successful life you take will add another card to their hand, increasing the chances that they have additional counter for the next attack. Let's say your opponent had 2 cards in their hand, and you have a 6k, 7k, and 9k attack ready to go. At 6k power, your opponent will need either a 2k counter or 2 1k counters in order to stop the attack. And with 2 cards in their hand, they might have a 2k counter, but they also might not. If you instead attack first with 7 and 9k, those attacks will likely be successful, but your opponent will then add 2 more cards to their hand, and now the chances of them having a card to counter out are much higher for your 6k swing. But if we instead go in ascending order, even if the attacks are successful, the next swing is going to be bigger, so even if they add more counters to their hand, they're going to need more counter, and there's a much higher chance that each attack is successful if we do it in that order. Another mistake players make, especially ones coming from other TCGs, is they'll play down characters from their hand before attacking with either their leader or characters already on the field. Remember, in One Piece, you can do anything in any order during your main phase, and you should take advantage of this. Dropping down characters, especially low-cost characters, before you are done attacking can put them at risk to powerful triggers that will take them out and can easily be avoided. As an example, you can see across the many different colors, there are lots of powerful effects that KO, bottom deck, or rest some of your characters. On that note, we want to keep our Dawn as active for as long as possible during our turn to keep our opponent guessing what's coming next. Are we going to play down a high-cost character? Are we going to attach some Dawn to one of our other characters and attack with a big swing? By not playing our Dawn or not using our Dawn at the start of our turn, we keep our opponent wondering what's going to happen, which can cause them to either overthink or misplay as they don't know what's coming next. As an example, let's say you're playing Shanks against Purple Luffy, and they just drop down the 5-cost Captain Kidd, and you're now at 6 Dawn. You have a 5-cost Ace and a Utah that you want to play. If you play them first and then swing 5k, they're guaranteed to block it, since you're now at 0 Dawn and have nothing else to play, and you have no other attacking characters. But if you instead attack first and leave 6 Dawn up as active, your opponent might actually think twice before blocking. Because you might have the 5-cost Luffy in your hand, and with 6 Dawn up, you could make him an AK attacker with Rush and attack that rested Captain Kidd on the same turn he's played. And while you know that you don't have this card, your opponent doesn't, and they might make the decision that it's not worth risking their Captain Kidd and choose to counter out instead when they could have used a free block. Of course, this won't always be possible. Sometimes you have to play a card in order to achieve your strategy, but when you can, keep your opponent guessing. Now, there are many cards in this game, and we don't expect you to learn them all, especially if you're a new player. But what I do expect you to do is if your opponent plays a card you have never seen before, especially on the TCG sim, take a few seconds and read its effect. I cannot tell you how many times I've had an opponent try to use some sort of removal on my 5-cost Ace before then seeing his effect activate and realizing he's staying on the board. When you see a new card, make sure you understand what its effect is so you can prioritize how important this is to your opponent and how much of a priority it should be for you to remove. And if you're still unsure after reading, you can just ask your opponent. Many players on the TCG sim are very friendly and will be happy to help if you just type out a quick question to them. Like any other TCG, the more you know about specific cards, leaders, and effects, the better you're going to get at the game. And while learning every color, leader, and ability is going to be beneficial, what I want you to do is treat this like subjects in school. You wouldn't do one math problem and then swap over to one science question and then go back to English. But you're essentially doing that if you play one game with a yellow leader, and then one game with a red leader, and then one game with a green leader right afterwards. And of course, I'm not telling you can't try multiple leaders, but once you find one that you sort of like, I would say give them a chance of at least 5 to 10 games so you can start to better understand how to play them. On that same token, if there's a certain color that you really enjoy, let's say black in this case, try a few different black leaders before making the jump to a different color so you can start to understand the basics of black before you move on. And you might say, well, what if I try black and don't like it? Well, even if that's the case, this is still not a waste of time, as even if you never play with another black leader, you will likely play against them in the future, and now that you know the core themes and strategies of some of the popular leaders, you're going to better understand how to deal with them, even if you're playing another deck. The main takeaway here is to not get overwhelmed with every color, every effect, and every leader all at the same time, but rather focus on 1 to 2 and slowly build your way up, and game knowledge will just come with time. The next mistake is not asking your opponent for a rematch after you lose to them. The most valuable thing you gain from matches is learning what cards your opponent runs and how they work, so you can try and figure out a way to counter them. Especially for new players, there's going to be a lot of cards and effects that catch you off guard, and you're going to misplay because you weren't expecting them. The benefit of a rematch is now you know those cards are coming, and you can alter your strategy to figure out how you're going to win this time around. The next mistake is having the wrong mindset or focusing on the wrong things as you play these games. To start, this game is extremely complex, and there will often be times where you feel like no matter what you do, you still end up losing. This can be very frustrating, but trust me when I say you are not alone, and it's part of the growing pains that every player faces as they start to grasp the many different concepts of strategy and tempo. And there will be some things that are out of your control. You might not draw the card you need on a specific Dawn curve. You might draw 3 counters in a row and have nothing to play. Your opponent might get 2 lucky triggers in a row that set you back and remove the advantage that you've built up over the game. This can be frustrating, but all of these things are out of your control, and focusing on them will only make you upset and do nothing to improve your game. That's not to say you can't make a comment like, oh, if I would have seen this one card, it could have been a different outcome, or I really wish I would have picked up this. I more want to steer you away from thoughts like, well, they only won because of that trigger. I played a better game. I should have had a better hand. And instead, let's focus on the decisions you actually made throughout the game and how those could be improved. No matter how many games you have under your belt, there will often be at least 1 to 2 decisions that you made throughout the game that could have gone a different way, or you could have tried a different strategy, and looking back and analyzing them is a sure way to improve. The final mistake and most important thing of this entire video is understanding that the One Piece TCG is a resource battle and not a battle of life. And our resources are comprised of the cards in our hand, the characters on the field, the Dawn we have, as well as our life. And so your primary goal is to remove their characters and cards in their hand until it's depleted and then go after their life. This is because when we target their life, their total resources actually remain unchanged as they just add that same card from their life to their hand. As an example, let's say your opponent had 4 cards in hand, 1 character in play, and 5 life. Their total resources are 10 cards right now. If we take a life, they add that card to their hand, but their total resources remain unchanged. If we instead attack a rested character, they will then either need to discard 1 card from their hand to counter, or let that character be sent to the trash, but either way, their total resources will now be down to 9. This is why board control is always our #1 goal, since a character off the field can no longer attack us, and by removing it, we're getting rid of their total resources either by that card being sent to the trash or by them countering out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you want to see more like it, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And let me know in the comments, what's the best piece of advice you've received on how to improve in the One Piece TCG? I'll catch you next time.